Welcome back to the deep dive. We're pushing forward in our series on the MPEP, the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure.
Yep, and today we're hitting a really specific but important part for older applications.
Right, we're diving into Chapter 2100, which is all about patentability, but our focus today, Section 2146.
Exactly, Section 2146. It deals with something under the Pre-AIA rules, specifically 35 U.S.C. 103C.
Okay, Pre-AIA 103C. So for someone maybe, studying for the patent bar or just encountering this, what's the core issue here? What problem does 2146 solve?
Well, think of it like this. Sometimes you have prior art, maybe something under the old 102E, F, or G rules.
Stuff developed by someone else.
Right. And normally, that kind of prior art could be used to say your invention is obvious under 103A. But Section 2146 provides a way out in certain situations.
Okay, so it carves out exceptions. Situations where something that looks like it makes your invention obvious actually can't be used against you for that purpose.
Precisely. It's an exception to the obviousness rejection, but only under the Pre-AIA framework. Very important distinction there.
Got it. Pre-AIA only. So what are these exceptions? What's the first big one?
The first one is all about common ownership.
Common ownership. Okay, let's break that down. What does that mean in practice?
It means if the invention you're trying to patent and the prior art reference that might make it seem obvious, if both of those were owned by the same person or entity, or were subject to an obligation to be assigned to the same entity at the time the invention was actually made, then that prior art reference can't be used for a 103A obviousness rejection.
Okay, so timing is critical at the time the invention was made.
Absolutely critical. It has to be common ownership then, not later.
And what does commonly owned really mean? Does, partial ownership count?
Nope. The MPP is very clear. It has to be complete ownership by the same entity or entities at that specific time.
Complete ownership. Why so strict?
Well, the idea is to prevent gaming the system. To stop someone from strategically buying up a potentially blocking reference after they've made their invention, just to try and get around the prior art.
I see. So it prevents that kind of after-the-fact maneuvering. Makes sense. Okay, so common ownership at the time of invention is one shield against obviousness. What else does Section 2146 cover?
The other major exception came about because of the CREATE Act. That was back in 2004.
The CREATE Act, right, I remember that. Cooperative Research and Technology Enhancement. What did that do in this context?
It basically extended this principle to collaborations.
Yeah.
It recognized that, well, a lot of important research happens when different companies or institutions work together.
So even if the invention and the prior art weren't technically commonly owned because different parties were involved.
Exactly. If there was a qualifying joint research agreement, a JRA in place, the prior art developed under that agreement by one party generally can't be used to make the other party's invention obvious.
Okay, a JRA. That sounds useful. But what makes a JRA qualifying for this purpose? Are there specific conditions?
Yes, three main ones you need to meet. First, the JRA itself, the actual agreement, had to be in effect on or before the date the claimed invention was made. Again, timing is key.
On or before the invention date. Got it. What else?
Second, the invention you're claiming, it has to have resulted from activities that were actually within the scope of that JRA. It can't be something totally unrelated that just happened while the JRA existed.
Right. It has to be connected to the collaboration in the third condition.
The third one is procedural. The patent application itself has to disclose, or you have to amend it to disclose, the names of all the parties involved in that JRA. Transparency.
Okay, let's try an example. Say, Big Pharmaco and a university lab have a written JRA for cancer research.
Good.
The university publishes an internal memo, maybe 102F or G type stuff, under pre-AIA rules about a related compound. Then, working under the JRA, Big Pharma develops a specific drug based on that line of research and files a patent. Under the CREATE Act exception, if all those conditions are met, JRA timing, scope, disclosure, that university memo couldn't be used to say Big Pharma's drug was obvious.
That's exactly the kind of scenario the CREATE Act was designed for. It prevents the collaboration itself from inadvertently creating blocking prior art for obviousness purposes between the partners.
That seems really important for encouraging joint R&D. But these exceptions sound powerful. Are there limits? Things they don't protect against?
Oh, absolutely. Big limitations. And this is crucial. These exceptions in 103C, the ones we're talking about in Section 2146,
yeah,
they only work against obviousness rejections under Pre-AIA 103. That's it.
Only obviousness. So what don't they help with?
They provide zero protection against an anticipation rejection under Pre-AIA 102.
Okay, anticipation. Remind me of the quick difference again?
Sure. Anticipation under 102 is basically saying this prior art reference shows exactly the same invention. It describes every element. Obviousness under 103 is more like, okay, maybe no single reference shows it all, but putting reference A together with reference B would have been obvious to someone skilled in the art.
Gotcha. So 103C only helps if the argument is, it would have been obvious, not if the argument is, it was already invented exactly like that.
Precisely. If the prior art anticipates your invention, common ownership or a JRA won't save you under this section.
Okay. Any other major things these exceptions don't cover?
Yes. Double patenting. These exceptions don't get you out of a double patenting rejection. That's a whole separate doctrine, ensuring you don't get two patents for the same invention or an obvious variation.
Right, double patenting. That's covered elsewhere in the MPP, I think.
Yeah, you'll find discussions in sections like 804.02 or 1451. So even if you overcome a 103A rejection using common ownership or a JRA, you could still face a double patenting issue if the claims are too close to, say, another patent owned by the same entity or arising from the same JRA.
Okay, good to know. Lots of potential pitfalls. And who has to prove all this? If an applicant wants to use one of these exceptions, what do they need to do?
The burden is entirely on the applicant. You have to affirmatively prove it.
Prove what specifically?
You need to provide evidence showing either that common ownership existed at the precise time the invention was made, or that a valid JRA was in effect, the invention fell within its scope, and you've disclosed the parties. The examiner isn't going to just assume it applies.
So meticulous record keeping becomes incredibly important, especially for dates and agreements.
Absolutely essential if you're dealing with pre-AIA applications and think these exceptions might apply.
So wrapping this up for the learner, for someone trying to navigate this, what's the big takeaway from MPP 2146?
The key takeaway is that under the pre-AIA rules, Section 2146 provides specific but narrow pathways to overcome an obviousness rejection based on certain types of prior art, specifically art under pre-AIA 102E, F, or G.
Right, through common ownership or a qualifying JRA.
Exactly. And understanding these rules highlights just how critical the relationships are between inventors, assignees, collaborators, and the timing of those relationships relative to the invention date.
It really paints a picture of how patent law tries to balance rewarding invention with preventing patents on things that were already effectively known or obvious, even within related entities.
It does, and it shows how the law adapted, like with the CREATE Act, to reflect changing ways innovation happens, like through more collaborations.
So to summarize real quick, MPP 2146 details pre-AIA 35 U.S.C. 103C. It offers exceptions to obviousness based on prior art under 102E, F, or G, if there was common ownership at the time of invention, or if the invention arose from a qualifying joint research agreement.
Correct. With the crucial caveats that these exceptions only apply to pre-AIA 103A obviousness rejections, not 100-to-2 anticipation or double patenting, and the applicant has to prove the conditions are met.
It makes you think, doesn't it? Even though these are pre-AIA rules, the whole idea behind the CREATE Act facilitating collaboration, how might that spirit, influence how people approach IP strategy and agreements even now under the AIA? Something to ponder.
Definitely food for thought. How collaboration is handled legally is always evolving.
Well, this has been another deep dive into the MPEP. We really need to give a special thanks to Mike Shepard, the creative director who organized this whole project and made this series happen.
Hear, hear. And just a standard reminder for everyone listening.
Yeah.
This summary was put together using AI tools. It's for education and information only. It is absolutely not legal advice.
That's right. For the real deal, you always need to consult the official MPEP text, talk to a qualified instructor, or get advice from a registered patent practitioner.
Always the best course.
Thanks for tuning in for this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.